Check, check. Hey everyone, it's Lee Pogue again, working on my next inquiry paper. This time we're talking about the Facebook self and interpersonal responsibility as a part of communication ethics literacy. I was really interested in the concept of interpersonal responsibility and the idea of the way that social media has been proliferated as I've grown into adulthood fascinates me. So I thought it would be a great combination of research. In this presentation, we'll go over what interpersonal responsibility is, the concept of the Facebook self, my findings. I'll go over some discussions on how communications ethics applies to my findings and some recommendations on how to address it, the implications on if it's not addressed, and if it does get addressed, further research recommendations, and a quick review of my references. So first we have interpersonal responsibility. Here we have Arnett, Fritz, and Bell, the authors of our textbook. And they talk about interpersonal responsibility as the responsibility we all have to use communication approaches and methods that protect the various relationships that we maintain. It's the idea that the approaches, the ethics, the methods, the way that we communicate with others needs to be done in a way that focuses on the relationship and the context of the relationship. Not all relationships are the same. A parent to child relationship is not the same as a friend to friend relationship. A superior to subordinate relationship is not the same. A professor to student relationship is not the same. And so it's important to focus on communication approaches that protect the purpose of that relationship as opposed to the aesthetic, which is being liked or being popular. Now, the concept of the Facebook self was introduced in an article in 2015 by Gilor, Levy-Belz, and Terrell. These three gentlemen here you see on the screen. They wrote an article in Psychology Frontiers, I believe it was called. We'll see in the references. But it's called The Facebook Self-Characteristics and Psychological Predictors of False Self-Presentation on Facebook. And this is a phenomenon I think is getting more attention today, I know, in the circles I run in. People talk about not being tricked by this perfect reality that their friends and peers show through Facebook, the always happy look, the great trips they go on, how perfect their kids are, how nice their house looks, #no filter. It's hard to feel like you can keep up with what they seem to present at times as this perfect life, and you want it yourself. So sometimes people fall in the trap of presenting the Facebook self, which is a gap between one's real self and one's online persona. Now, it's not bad to necessarily play with different identities. It's not bad to maybe show restraint in what you share publicly versus what you share in person. But what they found was that there are a lot of people that over extended period of time express a Facebook self and have this gap or identity incongruity, and it actually causes increased anxiety, depression, lack of self-esteem, and hurts people's ability to nurture relationships offline. So in the findings, I found two case studies. The first one, a young woman named Asena O'Neill, was an Instagram personality from Australia. From the age of 15, she presented this glamorous lifestyle. She'd made a lot of money posing in dresses like you see here on the screen. In 2015, she took down over 2,000 photos, recaptioned the rest, talking about how it was to film herself, take pictures, etc. You can see on the far right is a still of her video that she took, telling her audience about how false she felt her life had been and the pressure that she had constantly felt of showing this glamorous, happy lifestyle when really she wasn't eating well. She might take 100 shots in a day, yell at her sister to get it right, all to present this fake reality. So she kind of turned against it, and now she advocates for positive body image. She uses her fame more to help social causes, etc. But she came out in a very public way. The next person is Belle Gibson. Belle was known for, she had a couple 100,000 followers on Instagram. She claimed to have overcome brain cancer with natural remedies, healthy eating, exercise. She launched an app, had a cookbook, had a book deal in the works. She was exposed as a fraud. Her response, though, she didn't come out on her own. She was exposed, and she started talking about how her reality then was her reality. It simply changed. She couldn't give good answers as to what the doctors had told her when she had brain cancer. And she really took a public fall. Once again, we're seeing, I think this is an extreme case of that gap, that incongruity between one's real self and online identity. So as part of the discussion, like I'd mentioned before, interpersonal communication from an ethical standpoint is not about saying the right thing or looking as if one has all the ideas worked out. It's simply about not losing sight of one's relational responsibility to the other. And these two, I think, violated that ethic by presenting a level of inauthenticity to the relationship. One social network online is a legit social network. They presented a level of inauthenticity that led them to honestly feel this stress and have very public, I would say, meltdowns. And Gil Orr and et al., they all said that they believe that this consistent long-term gap promotes various psychological pathologies. So my conclusion on that was that while it's okay to not share everything about oneself, one must be judicious as to why you're practicing restraint with your online persona versus your in-person or real-life persona. If the gap grows too large, it makes it difficult for us to show that responsibility for our relationships, because we start to bring in lies essentially to that relationship, which then starts to slip into the aesthetic of being liked as opposed to taking care of the relationship. So my recommendations are, that come to mind. Parents and teachers need to proactively guide young people through formative years about what an authentic self is, and really give good, solid examples as to why what they see online might not project reality. I think that if youth are provided outlets such as hobbies, sports, whatever, as they're growing, they'll, develop a sense of identity around meaningful activities that really help them feel proud of and feel like what they do is worth expressing in realistic terms as opposed to Facebook self terms. I think that for more mature audiences, I know I'm influenced by things like TED Talks. I'm influenced by online personalities, influencers, different podcasts I listen to, peer networks as well. People that I respect and know, when they've presented subjects like this, I tend to stop and listen. I think if it were presented, it could go viral and help more mature users of social media not fall into this pit. And then also employers, I think, are a good path to helping train people the best way to use online social media and not. There's I would say corporate ethics that have to do with the way you use social media, but a lot of companies, I know Microsoft, where I work, is very concerned about work-life balance and healthy living. And I think this is something that could be introduced in the employer's realm to help, I guess, people like myself and others understand what the Facebook self phenomenon is and how to identify it and avoid it. Implications, the Facebook self, if it's allowed to continue unchecked, you might find a growing epidemic of people struggling to reconcile the multiple realities in which they're living. This could contribute to more, I would say, mental health issues. Effectively addressing it in formative years, I think, would help stave it off going forward. And it would help members of society more appropriately leverage Facebook as a tool to express responsibility for the relationships they maintain, as opposed to something that undermines it. Suggestions for further research. This study was done in 2015. Since then, other social media platforms have taken have grown in popularity. Tinder, Snapchat, Instagram, even though, these were Instagram cases, it's even bigger now, especially since Facebook purchased it. So I'd be interested to see how the Facebook self has gone beyond Facebook. I think it would also be important to focus on young people and see how the Facebook self influences younger people who grow up using this as opposed to adopting it later in life, and how it might be affecting their ability to do things like perhaps date, find a spouse, develop meaningful relationships among work peers, social peers, etc. References, our textbook, the article from Gil Orr, Levy, Bells, and Terrell, and then a lot of the references around the two, O'Neill and Gibson and their cases. It was a very great activity. I learned a lot. I'm much more cognizant, I think, of my own Facebook use, and I think I'm a little more wary of what people present now, and I'm more interested in using Facebook and other social media tools as a way to really nurture and take care of relationships, as opposed to keep up with the Joneses.